Hi everyone, this is Jen Curtis, pre and postnatal fitness specialist. I want to make this video today about getting back into fitness postpartum. I myself am 4 weeks post, this little guy is 4 weeks old today. And so I think this is a really good time, and I'm not going to cut the video because this is mum life. But I think this is a really good time to reflect myself and to share my thoughts on the process of getting back into fitness, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around when and how to get back into fitness. And most people feel that, you don't really get any guidelines from the hospital or from your care providers. So it's just kind of like, don't do anything for 6 weeks. Then you've got your 6-week checkup, and the doctor will give you the all clear to go and exercise. And then it's just, straight, for a lot of women, it's straight back into whatever they were doing before, whether it was running or an aerobics class or lifting weights or doing CrossFit. And there's kind of no gradient into the process. And I think that the kind of 6 weeks of nothing and then jumping straight in at the deep end is kind of like, it's a bit of a shame. And ideally, a lot of women that I see come to see me at 6 weeks, and then we start this slow process of kind of retraining and going back into building back up, starting slow and building back up into whatever they were doing before, or into something that feels like exercise. And I actually think that for most women, 6 weeks is a little bit late to start doing that. This depends on so many factors. If you're not sleeping, and if you're not rested, if you have any complications post-birth, then obviously this doesn't apply. And every single person, it's going to be on an individual basis. But what we can learn from the world of physiotherapy, for example, is that when people have an operation, when people are when people have a serious injury, the way of thinking nowadays is that we want to get them straight back into movement, any kind of movement that they can. Not moving is not good for us. Just being in bed, lying down, no movement whatsoever is really, really bad for us, and causes lots and lots of problems with, just your blood, how your blood flows around your body, with fluids stagnating in the body. It's just not good for us. And the idea is to get people moving straight away after any kind of injury, even if it's a shoulder injury or a hip injury or whatever, getting them doing what they can right from the beginning. If they've torn their ACL, we get the movement going whatever we can, even if it's just a few degrees, because tomorrow it's going to be a couple of degrees more and the next day it's going to be a couple of days more. And if we view postpartum training as getting back into if we view postpartum training as recovering from an injury, we can have the same approach. So, for example, I had a C-section, an unplanned C-section, and literally hours after my operation, I was in such a state physically and mentally, and literally hours after, it was like tough love from the nurses, like, get up and get to the toilet, we need to get you moving. And I was in so much pain, and getting up, I was like crying the whole way, but they still forced me to do it, even though it was painful and even though it was uncomfortable, because it's not good for me. And the next day I was not like some women seem to just get up and bounce up, and there's a range of like how women react, and I was not doing very well in the first few days. And the doctors were worried, and they wanted to give me medication because I'm not moving enough. And they said the only way we're not going to give you medication is to stop blood clots, is if you hit certain targets every day. You've got to get to the toilet, then the next day you've got to get to the nurse's station, and we want you to get down to the end of the corridor. And And so they really pushed me to move. And even though I was in pain, and even though it was difficult, it was so important for my overall health to get moving. And movement doesn't just have to be walking, it can be a lot of things. So in the early days postpartum, you know, even if you're after a C-section, or if you're after a really traumatic birth, movement might not just look like walking down the corridor. It might also just look like, you know, doing some shoulder rolls. You know, it might feel sore, there might be some stiff spots, but this isn't the same sort of, you know, it might be really difficult to sort of straighten up or to do anything that really heavily involves your abdominal muscles. But you can move this, you know, you can move your wrists, you can move your head, you can move your ankles, you can bend your knees, you can start from as far away, you know, a few days postpartum, you can start from as far away from the core as you can, and then work your way back inwards, moving different, moving body parts that are closer and closer and closer to your center. And likewise, you might want to try just, I mean, like, again, nothing, we're not talking about like, you don't have to get down on the floor and do a cat-cow 3 days after giving birth or having a C-section, or whatever you've been through, but you might want to just work on doing some like straightening your back and rounding your back just from a seated position, or I did it leaning over onto holding onto the back of a chair. You might want to just standing, just bend your knee and straighten your knee. Those kinds of movements early on are going to help you get back into things a lot quicker. Just tilting your hips, or tucking your hips under and straight and tucking them out. You know, things like this, just starting to get things moving very gently early on. And when you start that way, you can build on that every day, every week, every few days, whatever. It's not a race, and it's not something where we have to hit any targets. It's just a case of like checking in with our body, doing something that feels good, doing something that gets things moving a little bit. And if it doesn't feel good, if anything hurts, you pull back. But just checking in with your body and seeing what you can do each day, and then building on that, in the sense that you will find that every day or every few days you can do a little bit more, and you might have little regressions, or you might not feel good one day and then you reel it back, but it will steadily go up with little, you know, troughs as well, but you'll steadily be able to do more and more and more. And likewise, when you get back towards, some women will feel like they can do something, you know, if you had a really good birth and you're sleeping well and you've got good support around you, you know, some women might feel ready to do more at 2 weeks. You know, it does happen. And I get women writing to me at 2 weeks, you know, I've got no pain, I didn't have any stitches, I'm really fine. There's still healing to happen in the body, and it doesn't mean they can go straight back into working out, but or straight back into, like, you know, regular workouts, like not modified workouts. There's still things that we have to take into account. There's still things that were stretched out. There's still things that have to go back into place. The uterus still has to shrink down. There's still a lot of ligaments that were stretched out. The pelvic floor was still stretched out, even in the most perfect of births and the most perfect of scenarios. So there's still things that we need to allow to heal. But around that healing, there's movement that we can do. There's gentle stretching that we can do, you know, just doing forward bends, doing a deep squat, stretching out our hip flexors very gently, just doing spinal twists. And then there's also things like starting to build into some strength training, doing some glute bridges, for example, clamshells, band pull-aparts, you know, not even using any weights or anything like that, like just get maybe even squats or lunges, these very gentle body weight movements. Even if it's a half squat, you know, you're getting up and down out of a chair. Squats are just about the most functional thing you can do. And you can start that sort of movement 2 weeks postpartum, 3 weeks postpartum, 4 weeks, whenever you're ready. And you might not be ready for 6 months, and that's also okay. This video isn't about, you need to start a postpartum fitness program at 2 weeks. But I feel like I hear from a lot of women who do feel good before their 6 weeks, and they're kind of bouncing off the walls, and the kind of the way that we think or the way that most people think is that the ideal is no movement. The ideal is doing nothing and just complete total rest for 6 weeks or 40 days or 1 month or whatever the arbitrary number is. But actually, rest can involve some movement, some gentle movement. And what's gentle will depend on a lot of different factors. It might depend on your previous your training history, like what you were doing before. If you were lifting heavy weights and you were mega fit, then your gentle movement might look like a lot more than someone else's gentle movement who has never done any fitness in their entire lives. And that's okay. That's individualization. That's going to be different from person to person, and it's about finding what's right, the level that's right for you, not some kind of absolute that suits everyone. And unfortunately, guidelines from hospitals and doctors do often have to be, one size fits all, because we need a filter. We need something that's like that's like a hard concrete rule for everyone, and that serves its purpose too. I'm not knocking that, but actually, so most people have in their mind the ideal is absolute rest, bed rest, lying down, doing nothing for a month or whatever, and that's actually not what's ideal for the body. Some really gentle movement is part of is part of rest and recovery. Exercise is a stress on the body. It does cause a stress response, and it does create more things that the body has to heal from. And so we have to take that into account, and we have to be mindful of that, and we have to not overdo it. If we give too much training stimulus and too much stress, especially when you're not sleeping, and if you're stressed out, if you're not coping well with all the changes, it's not good to add to that loads of training stress. That's not going to be good for you. But some very gentle movement is going to help with that rest and recovery process, and it's going to help us, just by getting fluids going, getting blood going, getting joints moving, lubricating joints and things like that is just and mobilizing joints is going to really help ease pain and make us feel better physically and psychologically. So I just want to emphasize that there's a gradient, rather than 6 weeks of nothing and then start some boot camp or something. There's a gradient that can happen from whenever you're ready, from 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks postpartum, and it can be 6 months postpartum if you're not ready for that. But whenever you are ready, you can start with something and ease into each time, build on what you were doing before, until when you do get to 6 weeks and you get the okay from your doctor, it doesn't mean you can then just go straight back into like full training. There is a retraining process that needs to happen, where you continue that steady gradient, you continue that progressive overload until you get back to whatever you were doing before. But that process doesn't have to start at 6 weeks. It can start earlier, and it can start far more gentle than you can even imagine. Even if it's just circling the shoulders, it can start super gentle. So I just want to get away from that black and white thinking of like, you mustn't do exercise for 6 weeks, because exercise and movement can look very, very different. It can look like doing a really intense CrossFit class, or it can look like doing some gentle shoulder rolls and some neck movements that really might feel quite challenging a few days after giving birth. So I hope that makes sense and that I made myself clear in that video. It was a little bit random, just some thoughts that have been going on in my mind, a little bit unstructured. So I hope that's useful for anyone who sort of is keen to get back into exercise early postpartum and wants to know how to do it. Listen to your body, but you need to know what to listen for. You need to listen to pain or feelings of heaviness or any discomfort, or signs of like feeling overtired. But there is a lot more that you can do, and if you want to actively aid your recovery, there's a lot more you can do that will actually benefit you, that won't hold you back. And I want to encourage you to do that and to not just do this absolute bed rest thing. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. If this did help you, give this video a like. If you think it can help someone else who's just had a baby or who's pregnant and will need this afterwards, send this to her, and if you want more videos like this, subscribe to my channel. So thanks very much for listening. Bye.